Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for returning to the Applied AI stage. Just to recap, for those of you who are new to the room, my name's Gary Abella, and I'm the pleasure of being your host for the rest of the afternoon. I come from the AI background and have a small bespoke agency here that helps companies take AI research into production and developing and deploying AI solutions. So I've had a thrilling time this morning, and no doubt we're going to have another great few sessions this afternoon. So now that our tummies are full and our minds are re-energized, I'm really going to jump straight back into our next talk, and a vitally important session that's often really overlooked in that whole data science life cycle, which is the importance of ethical and compliant data collection. And now our esteemed guest to be able to talk that through is co-founder and CEO of Brighter AI, Mr. Marian Gläser. Please welcome me on stage.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me, and the food has settled as much that also the ears are open. So you have now, I would say, 30 seconds to leave the room if you want to, because I will talk about the GDPR. I will talk about the APPI, the Japanese Data Privacy Regulation. I will talk about the CCPA, the Californian Consumer Privacy Act, and a couple of others. I will make it fun. So if you had the attempt now to leave the room, or I have the ambition to make it fun, and I will have the ambition to make it very practical on the use cases that we are working on, and not give a commercial presentation, but an insight a bit of how we reflect the industry, how data privacy developed within the last couple of years worldwide, the compliancy developed well in the different regions, and how to actually bring this together with AI, with machine learning, because this is where and I don't have a slide for this because I think that everyone in the room is aware of it. Most of the AI development relies on a lot of data, on big data, and if you have a privacy regulation, you roll your eyes and you say, okay, this is limiting us. And if we are in Europe or in more and more regions in the world, you need to find solutions that are within privacy for our values, but also allow machine learning. So, without further ado, I'm Marian Gläser, co-founder and CEO from Brighter AI, a privacy tech company here from Berlin, about 60 people. I'm also speaker for the Federal Association of Startups for AI, as well as privacy speaker for the AI Association, as well as a couple of others. Background is in automotive, as well as in consulting. That's enough about me. And a bit about the company, just so that you know what's the background of what we're doing. Founded in 2017, 19 Europe's hottest startup by NVIDIA with a data privacy topic. And data privacy was not really that hot at that time. I'm not sure if it ever is, but German Innovation Award, most relevant cybersecurity company in Europe, and quite happy about the use cases that we're working on and the things that we do. So first up, is privacy a thing? So is this really something to talk about besides regulation? I mean, in the Industrial Revolution, in the French Revolution, people are fighting for their rights and they are fighting for freedom. And within RGBs, we click them away with every sign-up. And so often, this is not really a thing, apparently, or sometimes, or is it? I will hopefully answer this question, but I first want to go a little bit into the history and how old, at least, the enforcement of privacy and how it's being seen in the past evolved, and how do we get to the current day. It's actually quite long ago, already in 1361, that there was the first privacy law of not stalking, basically, which was implemented in the law. Then A couple of hundred years later, everyone knows it. You're not allowed to open letters. Another milestone that is today very much accepted. Another one in 1888, there were first cameras introduced, modern cameras. A huge spark in the media. What does this mean to privacy? All of a sudden, you can be captured everywhere. And in 1948, the UN acknowledged that it's a fundamental human right. And there was the rise of privacy. It took a couple of hundreds of years. And then there's the second part. In Facebook, 2010, they put the default of data from private to public. And Mark Zuckerberg said privacy is no longer a society norm. In 2011, smartphones were released with the first tracking systems. The New York Times declares the age of big data. In 2012, Girls Around Me, an app, was forced to shut down, which would tell you where are girls around you. So it got a little bit absurd within the last, I would say, 15 years. And then, of course, a couple of other things happened, and then the GDPR came. So this is the world, how we look at it today, or no, to 2018. This is how it looked in 2018. The GDPR got in place, specifically looking at data breaches, at how to basically tackle data leaks, how to make sure principles such as data minimization are kept, and so on. And now we're in this complex world where we see privacy for every one of us, right? Nobody wants that actually kind of data gets out of finding people specifically in public, being exposed. So it is not just a fundamental right, but it's actually for every one of us something that is quite valuable. And on the other hand, you have the regulation, GDPR is too restrictive. It's limiting Europe in the way going forward. The GDPR, in a lot of ways, really needs to have a do-over. But it's there, and it does support the first part. So how to actually find a way to go around this and bring privacy and data together. And I want to give one more example. Because often when we think about privacy, we think about, like especially privacy in big tech, we think about accepting the AGBs. And again, French Revolution, fighting for rights. It's a little bit different emotionally, but there are other examples where it does matter a lot. And it's no surprise picking this example, because this is the area we're working in, as well it's one of the most critical one. But also one of the most exciting one, right? You have cameras all around the world. You use them for safety, but you can use them for innovation. You can use them for hundreds and thousands of different business applications, from cost saving, for within public transport, for autonomous driving, which are relying on camera data, for new insights and store concepts such as Amazon Go. So really, really powerful medium. One of the richest sensors, in fact, cameras, and cheap as well, which is great. And with that, you can do, as said, quite a lot of things: people flow, eye analytics, like understanding the accessories of the person, the emotion of the person. You can really in-depth understand this person, who he's with, and when he's with, and what he's doing, how he's feeling towards everything around him or her. This guy's him. And you could say here, well, he's in a crowd, right? So he's pretty much autonomous, so identity should be fine. Well, in this age of basically AI and analytics, there are technologies that are also evolving, which can be used for good, but they can also be used for privacy violation. And this is when then any kind of breaches of big data sets actually really makes sense to protect them somehow. This person, for example, by a single shot of his face and a tool called PimEyes, you can find this person everywhere online. His personal profile, any kind of LinkedIn, his meetups that he went to, his private details, when he's on a photo with someone else that he even didn't consent to. And then it becomes actually a little bit scary, because your face is an access code to your identity. However, you cannot change your face. And that's similar for a lot of other personal identifiable things that you have. And I hope I with this example, answered at least the question why privacy really matters. And it's sometimes a little bit different than just accepting AGBs. The EU acknowledged this as well. There have been almost 3 billion euros in fines against data privacy regulation. And you remember this slide? We actually spoiled it a little bit. This is how it looks today. So when there were voices in 2018 that privacy would be a flink, it's not. It became a worldwide aspect. So let's go on to a journey. Let's go on to a journey with an AI company. Let's go on a journey with an AI automotive company. Because lots of corporates, they're not just basically in one nation doing their development, doing their research, doing their development of, in this case, self-driving cars, but doing this worldwide, right? And this is, for every AI deep learning engineer, this is highly simplified, labeling, training, test run, validation. So if there are any questions that this flow is incorrect, you misunderstood the presentation. So we're going on a journey with a tier 1 automotive, so classical company that basically supports the OEM with bringing certain features to the market. Here basically self-driving car assistant functions, ADAS functions. And they're doing data collection in Europe. They're doing labeling in Brazil. They are doing the model training with another company in the Silicon Valley. Where else? Where the big chip manufacturers are sitting. And they're doing also, of course, model validation in Japan. They need to test that it actually worldwide works. So they have a bit of a journey of data that travels through the world. And I don't want to bore you with basically all these different regulations in detail, but just giving a gist of how privacy now complicates this entire flow. So in Europe, in the GDPR, actually it's very consent-driven. So how do you get a consent when you go around with a mapping vehicle from a person that you're capturing? That's practically impossible. So you need to find different legal or technical ways. That's a big one. Another big one is, of course, the penalties, up to 4% of the annual turnover as a penalty for companies breaching the GDPR. So for this company, even to start the data collection, that's a headache you start with. But then the next part, very expensive labeling. You find a good company in Brazil. And Brazil also has a quite strict privacy regulation introduced, I think, in 2020. And it's also for them, you're processing personal identifiable information. It actually, in their regulation, also doesn't matter if it's Brazilian data or if it's European data. And their basically impact and risk assessment is quite heavy the moment that you want to import the data and then with labels export it again. They as well have heavy fines. Next, the training that needs to be conducted in the US, the model training. Of course, there's also test cases that people are going in. It's not a model that is only specifically for one client, as this company is quite good in providing these models to multiple tier 1s and OEMs. And also they're doing risk assessment. They need to find ways to collect the data within California, or maybe need to move to other states. Virginia also released a new privacy regulation. Ohio is on the verge on. So you're getting the picture. So if you're someone that manages this data flow, you would say, can we just get rid of privacy? Can we just focus on autonomous driving? Again, I said, you probably already got it. Japan is then not making it even better. In fact, we've been in Japan early this year for a couple of months. And for anyone who's been in Japan and in business relations before, probably knows the situation. For the Japanese companies that we're working with, it's actually not so much about the regulation, but it's about ethics. They're saying, if we feel we're doing something good for our country, for our humanity, basically doing something about data privacy, then we should do it. So in the end, basically, there was not a big aspect of looking at the regulation itself for those companies, but the aspects of doing data privacy. So from this data journey, privacy regulation will stay. And I could say it even more drastically. Gartner predicts that 75% of the world's population will be regulated with some kind of data privacy regulation. And it also means in order to collect huge amounts of data worldwide as a company, you have to accept that this is part of the process. Such as for security, nobody is questioning anymore that you need a firewall or that you have to have access management. These are all things that became normal and regular. And the same goes for data privacy. It's something that is becoming and will be even more an integrated part of data processing when it comes to big data worldwide. And there are several companies that provide solutions. So from synthetic data, where let's stay in our example, where you try to augment data sets with 3D generated content. There are companies with unstructured synthetic data, where attributing the real world with artificial data in order to, for example, anonymize. There are companies that do secure environment, federated learning, differential privacy, k-anonymity. So there's a wide range of solutions. And the key point is that these companies, in our case, smart cities and automotive, they specialized on taking off the burden of the company of data privacy. So we see it for ourselves. We are successful in a company if our clients can forget about all these regulations, can ignore basically a session like this because they know data privacy is taken over from someone else who does this on a continuous basis. In 2018, and this is the only slide where I talk specifically very briefly about our solution per se. In 2019, the French tier 1, Valeo, which is worldwide collecting data, they wanted to publish basically a data set that they aggregated in order to flourish the community. This is why I also can talk quite openly about it, because it's public knowledge. And it's, I think, 15,000 images from public, 15,000 potential images from a Thomas that can be captured there. So it's highly critical to actually have this data privacy compliant when you publish it openly. So what we do as a company, and we supported them with, is anonymizing this data with artificial faces and with artificial license plates. And why is this relevant for anyone who is in machine learning and training? You want to have the clearest, you want to have the most natural data possible. Our CTO says data must be like sushi, as raw as possible. And in the end, any kind of blurring and traditional black bars would only limit a company to really execute their mission on self-driving vehicles. Even worse, they might come to a conclusion that they don't have a measure and that would decelerate in development, or even better, if they have, that they can drive the innovation. Was quite complex because it's fisheye data. It was quite a different type of camera set, and now basically this part is covered for them. And it's only, as I said, for the landscape, it's only one example of many how to bring privacy actually into the real world with AI and for AI. And so then you have those single solutions. But what you really need, and this is what I said before, you need to somehow integrate it into your processes. And they are also the first companies that are doing this. To example, Siemens building up SimScepter, and one dedicated stage is offline processing and data anonymization. There you see an artificial license plate. DXC, a tier 2 from the US, also building up their data pipelines directly with an anonymization solution built in order then in the end to allow the full data being processed in a compliant way. And I think this is in the end one of the key targets. Very explicitly, we have innovation with big data on one hand, and we're having privacy on the other hand. I hope I could give you a sense why privacy is not just an accept button, but really, really matters. And that data is important, I don't need to say, and that it's really relevant. It's bringing these two worlds together with new type of technologies, in the end, what allows not just basically European companies that are affected by the GDPR, but worldwide companies that are collecting data all around the world to move society forward in terms of innovation and data privacy. And without further ado, this is it for me. If you're interested in more data, also we have a white paper on worldwide data privacy regulation. You scan this code, I can send this to you via email, or my colleagues will send it to you via email. And I know I shouldn't have finished that much early, but I wanted to leave some time for some questions. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Marian. And so whilst you guys are thinking if you do have any questions, I had a question for you. So we talk a lot about the impact of labeling on effectively the ethics or the results of the output of the model. And so as an anonymization expert, maybe you could help educate me and then the rest of the group here on different methodologies of anonymization and how that, in fact, then infers a different result or potentially does or does not infer a different result. And what's your view there?
Yeah. So first, anonymization, before talking about the technologies, very, very glimpsely, anonymization is a tricky word, in fact. There are some people, including our head of data privacy in Germany, Ulrich Kelber, who believe there is no anonymization at all. In some ways, he's correct, because I have time, right? I give one example. Time. So we're working with the Deutsche Bahn. They're actually one of our investors, and they have 40,000 cameras. And there was a discussion at which point data is sufficiently anonymized. And then the discussions were going on, and there was the point where we were talking, if you have a single point in an image, everything else is black, a single point of a station, and you also have the plan of when persons from the staff is working there, when the train station closes, the single point becomes an identity. Because you have the plan, you have the point, you know what the person is doing. Of course, labor law, if this person is sitting in a corner, does he not do his work, right? So it was a rabbit hole of, do we want to really talk about it? Because it becomes very absurd at some point about the ifs and whens. So, which the worker has completely the right to be anonymous. So this dot shouldn't exist. But the question is it basically only the anonymization, or do the rest of the processes also need to stay in place? For example, shutting the cameras off at some point. So the more relevant question when it comes to anonymization, and this is by best practice now the recent definition, within the data collection scope, is it still feasible to reconstruct an individual within time, effort, and resources? And if this is not the case, then by best practice, it's anonymized. And I think this is a very much better definition for it. And then if you're asking about different types of anonymization, of course, you can have basically an almost absolute anonymization, almost, again, eventually not possible, like blurring the entire body. Right? This is one for image data. For text data, it would be removing the data completely. Or you can go an approach with synthetic data, that you're replacing effectively the original data with artificial data, which still resembles the original data, but is not connectable to the original data. And then, is it feasible within time, resources and effort to reconstruct a certain person, for example, then actually depends on the domain. And we're looking in our use cases with automotive at hundreds of thousands of hours, and it's not feasible to click through an image and try to find, with an artificial face, a person anymore, but it's more being a safeguard also from advanced analytics to find identities and track them. So I answered your question a little bit longer, but anonymization is quite tricky, but it's a fascinating field because it's the ability to actually remove the most sensitive data and making companies compliant.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that.
All right.
So with that said, I think we can move on to the next. Oh, we have a question here from Faye.
You have the picture of 75% of the countries now also leverage GDPR, right? I want to have one challenge question. Because GDPR started in Europe, right? If you, of course, it's a success for GDPR that 75% of the country in the world leverage this regulation. However, if you compare the success of AI, I think Europe is far behind China and the US. And since you promote privacy, I'm also really think it's very important. How can you predict in 2 or 3 years whether the situation will change, that the European will be one of the leading, the top 2 in the world? Because now 70% is the success of GDPR, but we are far behind, right? What's your explanation and your prediction for the future?
Yeah, a good question. So I think that not just within machine learning, Europe is behind, but also in other disciplines. So it's maybe not the GDPR that slows down Europe, but it's other things that slow down Europe. Because there are technologies to actually overcome this. For your question, worldwide perspective, more and more nations are adopting to privacy regulation similar to the GDPR. And if there's a general understanding similar to the UN that certain data needs to be protected, then everyone at some point will be in the boat of having basically data privacy to comply with. And then it's not Europe anymore. And in the US, it's already happening. In Canada, it's quite happening. So it will not be a competitive disadvantage at some point anymore if this continues as it continues right now. And if you continue the development to solve this problem, then let's not talk about the problem, but the solutions to bring this together. Does this make sense?
It's reasonable, but I still do not see the solutions in order, because GDPR is regulation, right? As I mentioned this morning, regulation is not sufficient. We need the way to the success, right? Yeah.
And hopefully we can take that offline and find some solutions together. But thank you, Marian.
One more thing. So you saw Thomas. Here we anonymized Thomas with an artificial face, and he's not found anymore online. So you can sleep now calm. He's protected as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I shall take that from you. Thank you. Right, so thank you for such an incredible talk. And it would be impossible for me to stand here today in Germany talking about AI with not having one of our most important players in the ecosystem, our nation-beloved SAP. And we're lucky to have Fee join us.